pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome. This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. I don't see anyone present, so I guess we're all set in terms of
Hi, Mr. Cohen.
the media. No, I don't think he's working for the Lowell Sun. All right. First item of business, the consent agenda, school committee meeting of October 6th. Any corrections? Comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of October 6, 2015.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the committee minutes of October 6th. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. It's the time for public comment. Do you want to talk now? No. Okay. Okay, student representative, you're on.
There's really not much for news. Senior night for girls soccer was tonight, so we're really looking forward to that. And we're really happy. All our seniors are really great this year, and we're really gonna miss them. PSATs were Wednesday the 14th. Those were during the school day, and they went really well. A lot of students said they didn't have too much trouble, which was really good. Theater is preparing for the musical, and the roles are finally cast. Our musical this year is The Sound of Music, so we're all really looking forward to that. And theater just went and saw Cinderella on Thursday the 8th, and they said it was a very good show. The band traveled to URI on the 10th and performed, and they did really well. Chelmsford is hosting the next Western Suburban Science League meet on November 12th. So 19 other schools and their teams will be visiting Chelmsford in the afternoon and competing in 4 science-themed events. So that's really cool for us, and our science team has done pretty well in the past, so we're really looking forward to that. We are having a speaker come. I don't know the exact date, but he's doing a presentation called Sober Thoughts. And Sober Thoughts is a drug, alcohol, and tobacco presentation that is like no other, as it is more inspirational, more thought-provoking, and engaging by speaking with the students instead of at them, using unique magic skills, illusions, skits, and other techniques to convey important messages. And our last thing, which I thought was really cool, a sophomore at our school, Cal Gundy, was selected to receive the first prize in the essay contest on the topic of Gandhi's message and his influence on the world. And the award will be presented on October 17th at Regis College.
Very good.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any additional good news?
Sure, we have great news. So Byam is off to a great start this year. They had their first all-school Pride Assembly, and this is where they talked with the students about the district's core values and how the students can exhibit them each and every day. And what was happening is, so the students at the Byam, they get roars for, showing these Pride initiatives, and the students were giving out their roars, and it was very exciting, and they had a very good time. Additionally, South Row had a very successful pumpkin fair on October 17th this past weekend, and Parker Middle School is having a pizza, pumpkin, and book event on October 29th. So lots of pumpkins are happening in October. What a surprise. And then lastly, Dr. Bayronovan was the keynote speaker on the topic of the popularization of math at the Math for Educators Conference, and that was at the Hyatt in Boston. It's a professional learning conference for the math leaders. So that's it. Very exciting.
Very good. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. First of all, I'd like to thank the town meeting reps and town officials for the support of the articles last night at town meeting that with the benefit of Chelmsford Public Schools. And I'd also like to commend DECA for the magic show they had Saturday night. It was fantastic. I haven't seen a lot of magicians, but it was very professional, sound, lighting, everything, and it was just an hour and a half straight through. I was really, really impressed. So, all right, new business, rescheduling of our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first agenda tonight, as we talked about at the last meeting, The recommendation is to cancel the previously scheduled meeting for November 3rd. That was a Tuesday. To cancel that meeting and move it to the following Monday. We've been able to talk with Dorothy Presser from the Mass Association of School Committees about having her come and actually do a workshop-style meeting that night on general board governance and also talking about the goals for the school committee and myself for the upcoming year. In addition, I think it actually is timely. The end of that week, the 4th through 6th, is the school committee superintendent conference at the Cape. I know several members are going to that, so that'll actually save us the night before going to that, so that we can get a good night's sleep and get to the Cape for the conference. So we'd recommend the board formally vote to cancel the November 3rd meeting, and then have me post with Debbie a meeting for that following Monday, the 9th.
Motion?
I make a motion.
Motion's been made to change our meeting date. The second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposition or abstention? None. Okay, personnel report.
Yes, this is the second item on the agenda. When we talked at the end of the summer, I indicated on a monthly basis I was going to bring forward a personnel report to just show for the school committee all the new hires to the district. As you can see, over the last month or 6 weeks, we have several new hires, a lot of new paraprofessional staff in the district, some reading and math interventionists, as well as a few anticipated retirements and resignations. And I think this is a good way to document the staff, new staff, welcome them to the district, and then also recognize staff who have worked for us who will be resigning or retiring in the coming months and certainly over the course of this school year. So I just want to share that information and would ask you just to accept it as information.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. Are the interventionists covered by a grant or?
The Title I, they're covered under Title I grant.
Thank you. Any other questions with regard to the staffing?
You know, something I haven't seen for ever, I guess, would be an organization chart, just to kind of have a sense of where people are. I know that it's more than a single page. You probably have one for every school, but you know, just it would help to visualize some of these changes, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
It also would feed into the job description work when we go
Right.
on with that, so. Very good. Okay. Approval of out-of-state field trip.
Yes, you have one request for an out-of-state field trip. It's November 13th. The PAVE class at Chelmsford High School is looking for permission to go to the Nashua Armory and Mall for just a one-day trip. It's not an overnight trip for their class, so I would recommend the committee authorize that field trip.
Would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion that we approve the field trip as requested for the PAVE class to be on November 13th, 2015. They have 8 chaperones.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
What does PAVE stand for? It's another acronym. Anyone know?
I don't know.
Come on, student.
I have no idea.
That's why you're here.
I've never seen that
Never.
either.
Yeah, me either. Okay.
Good answer.
Essentially, it's the group that does, I think it's the group that does the coffee
Oh, okay.
thing on Friday and
Got
all that kind of thing. But I don't,
It is.
yeah.
I just don't know what and I'm trying, I have a lot of acronyms for tonight in my head, so I prefer to,
Save them.
table that.
Save them.
Okay. All right.
All right, the next item, actually, I'm going to ask, I turn this over to Dr. Hirsch to give us the academic review from last spring, the MCAS scores are in, and some of the other assessments that the students in the district participate in. Dr. Hirsch has a PowerPoint presentation put together so that we can watch, and you do have a copy of it in your packet.
Okay, thank you. So tonight I am going to be talking about our district MCAS scores, advanced placement, SATs, and ACT scores. A few things, I am going to be talking about a lot of acronyms tonight. One of them includes the Progress and Performance Index. It's the PPI. I'll be repeating that often. Think of the Composite Performance Index, which is the CPI, and Student Growth Percentile, which is the SGP. A few things, I'm going to go through and give you some examples of what our accountability data looks like tonight. However, the state has not completed all of the accountability data reports for all the districts since some districts administered Park. We don't anticipate receiving all of our accountability data until December of this year. So first off, we're going to start with MCAS. So in this slide, it reviews the major changes that came about as a result of the Massachusetts Federal Elementary and Secondary Act, which was the flexibility waiver. This includes narrowing our proficiency gap by 2017. So in Massachusetts, what they did is they replaced the No Child Left Behind goal of 100% of students reaching proficiency by 2014 with the goal of reducing the proficiency gaps in half by the end of 2017. So we're quickly approaching that. So the proficiency gap is that distance between the group's current proficiency level and 100% proficiency. So I'll give you some slides and show you what that actually looks like. So under this flexibility waiver of reducing that proficiency gap, we have a 6-year period. So this example slide right here talks about what that actually looks like for us for accountability. So we use that composite and performance index measure, and we'll be talking about that a little bit tonight too, which represents how close all the students are in reaching that 100% proficiency gap. So if you take a look at this slide, in 2011, that was our baseline, and this is not our district, but this is an example district. So the district was at 76. That was the baseline. In order to reach 100%, they would have had to have 24 more points. What you have to do is cut that proficiency in half, which is really actually 12 points. So by 2017, a district would have had to have reached 88. So based on what our district have, and that's the information that we're waiting for from the state to see where we are in comparison to our baseline. So instead of reaching 100% proficiency, it's cut in half to meet that proficiency gap of 50. So then what ends up happening is we get what's called the Progress and Performance Index rating, and this is based on 7 core indicators. This table up here displays the 7 core indicators as well as what's called extra credit points for moving students from the warning from failure to warning and from proficient to advance. What happens is at the elementary and the middle schools, they're responsible for the first 5 indicators, and the high school has the annual dropout rate and cohort graduation rate added to their progress and performance index. If you look at the formula at the top, what they do is they weight the years. So the first baseline year only had a weight of 1, 2012 had 2, and so on and so forth. And as we get up closer to that 2017 time, you'll find out that they'll divide that obviously by 10, and we will find out where we are in terms of that proficiency rating. So these are the fundamental concepts related to the accountability and assistant levels, which includes levels based on a 4-year trend with final classifications. And that's what we're waiting for, is that final classification for this current school year. And this is just a snapshot of the different levels for each school. Now, last year, we know that Chelmsford was a level 2 school district, and we needed technical assistance in our special ed, which we're seeing in our grant funding and some of the initiatives that we're working on this year. And if you noticed on the right-hand side, it also talks about how much the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education would be with engagement with the school district. So most school districts, unless they're the bottom 20%, fall on that level 1, level 2 rating, and right now we're trying to find out where we are. When a school is, when a district is given a level, it's based on the lowest level of each school in the district. So if all of our schools were at level 1 and one was at a level 2, we would be a level 2 school district in the eyes of the state. So what does this all look like? So what we get is we get layers of accountability reporting from the state, and this is what we're waiting. And I do have some data for you on top of it, but it's important to know what the layers look like and then how this affects what we do in our classrooms. So what ends up happening is you have 3 layers of data. The first layer is the data that we look at for the district. We need to see how we're doing as a district as a whole. It gives us our levels, and it lets us get a kind of that bird's eye overview of what it looks like for the district. In layers 2, we would be looking at the individual schools. I would want to see Chelmsford High School, McCarthy Middle School, Parker Middle School. So we would drill it down to the school level. And then in layer 3, we'd be looking at the individual subgroups. And when I talk about subgroups, we're talking about special education, our L students, our low-income students. So we want to see how those different subgroups are doing and how our students are doing overall. So this is an example of what the first layer report looks like. This is the first thing we want to see. It will tell us our designation, what we have, if we're meeting requirements with our special ed group, and then those are those subgroups that you can see underneath. Layer 2, we would be looking, second layer of the report. This is where you can see the actual data for each of the indicators for ELA, mathematics, science, and how the high school is doing. And then with layer 3, you can look at each of those indicators. So let's look at English language arts for each one of those students and see how they are performing respectively. Now, in Chelmsford, we drill it down a little bit further. So each of the departments, all the grade levels, receive grade level reports, which are generated by our department coordinators. And then teachers receive their individual reports for their students, the actual students they have in their classroom, and who they had before, depending on what grade level they are, if the students have taken MCAS, as well as how they are performing as a teacher with their student growth percentile. Okay, so what does this all mean? Do we have any data? We do. So the good news is we have some. So here is the overall look of grades 3 through 10 for all of our students in the district for English language arts, mathematics, science, technology, and engineering. So you'll note that, and you also have the composite performance index and the student growth percentile. So you'll notice that 82% of our students are proficient or advanced in MCAS, grades 3 through 10. Mathematics, 76% of our students are proficient or advanced. And in science and technology, 70% of our students are either advanced or proficient. So let's take a look at what these things mean individually. So I talked about the composite performance index. So basically it's 100 points. It's assigned to the students. There's the 100 for if you're an advanced or proficient, 75 for needs improvement, warning is 50, and so on. It goes down from there. So what they eventually do is each student is assigned a composite performance index rating number. They add them all up, and they divide it by the amount of students that are assessed. So here we are with how our students did as an overall in the whole district for our composite performance index. And you'll see we're well above the state averages, and this is for English language arts. But what's important to understand is that growth gives us a broader view of how our students are actually doing compared to like peers. So it's not just about getting proficient in advance. It allows you to, it's almost like a level playing field. So what they do is they look at students that are performing at the exact same level and then see how that growth looks like compared to their peers, and that's how we end up getting a growth percentile. What we do is we like to have the students between 40 and 60 for the percentile, with 50 being a full year's growth for student achievement. And if you take a look at for English language arts, all of our students are 50 or above, with some of them actually in the high growth category in grade 6. Mathematics, same thing, following in the same suit. Our composite performance index for our mathematics is well above the state average. And again, in that growth area, you'll notice that even in grades 6 and 10, our students are in high growth, but again, well above that 50%, which is a full year growth for students. So our students are performing very well, no matter what category where they started off. And in science, our CPI in science is still above the state average. And in science, there is no SGP. There's no student growth percentile for students because they take the test in grades 5, 8, and 10. There's no consecutive years to show that growth percentage. So we have the composite and performance index for science, again, above the state average. So what does this all mean? So as we drill down, we're looking at the areas of development. How do we continue with our test scores to be high growth, high growth and high composite performance index? And that's all the work that we do. So as we drill down into the different levels, we'll continue with a few areas of development. I talked in the district improvement plan about our mass tiered system of support that we're working at. That's one of our initiatives. Each of the schools are working on this individually in the grade levels. As we work through the initiative, it's important that we work closely with our special ed department, as that population is one of the higher numbers that makes up our high needs category when we get those accountability data information. So we'll work side by side with our special ed department. And during the district improvement presentation. We reviewed that we'll be still working on our co-teaching. We changed that model a little bit at the middle school level with a different group of students that we're targeting for this current school year. So we'll have the data on that to see how they're doing. And next week, actually, our teachers are receiving training again through Susan Hentz for co-teaching. So all the teachers will be out next week working on this training. Not all the teachers, the co-teachers. All our teachers are leaving the district. That would be bad. And
Sub-budget.
that would be really bad. It's all right, it's in the grant. And we'll continue to implement the universal design for learning and professional development in that area. This year is our second year working on with our students, our L population, with a new curriculum that is in alignment to our standards. We have 3 levels. We have the Inside, Reach, and Edge for the 3 different levels, and our L students are working with that curriculum. This past September, just last month, our teachers were trained in Fontes and Pinnell benchmark system, sometimes otherwise known as the BAS, as well as leveled literacy intervention. And this will be our first year implementing standards-based report cards K through 4 at the elementary level. And don't forget, tomorrow night there's a nice parent meeting where I'll be talking again, because I love presentations, at the Performing Arts Center from 6:30 to 7:30. And this will allow us to report to parents the progress against the standards, and it will also help us inform our instructions as we work on our benchmarks and our pacing guides. So that is the MCAS presentation, and I'm going to move a little bit forward into advanced placement. And hopefully you're all taking lots of notes. Okay, the basics. Let's start with some background about advanced placement. So AP courses reflect what is taught in top introductory college courses. At the end of the course, students take the AP exam. It's a standardized exam, measures how students have mastered college-level work, and students who do well on the AP exam earn credit or towards college placement when they're applying to their schools, based on what those schools are willing to accept. The classes tend to be fast-paced. Material is more than a typical high school class. Students work independently, complete lessons, assignments, homework. They're encouraged to manage their time, prioritize their work, form study groups. So why take an AP exam? So if you earn college credit through an AP exam, it allows the students to move to an upper-level college course sooner. They could pursue a double major. They could gain time to study and travel abroad. And this is just a snapshot. We offer 19 courses for junior and senior year for advanced placement at CHS. And when it comes to AP results, success on an AP exam is defined as a 3 or better on the exam. This is based off of the National Center of Educational Accountability. And they found that students that receive a 3 or better on an AP exam have a strong prediction of persistence rates while they're in college in order to earn a bachelor's degree. So what you have here is actually how many exams were offered for our students, what they received for scores, and the total amount of exams and the different categories that they could do. So in the month of May 2015, there were 237 students that took 454 advanced placement exams, with 81% of the grades falling between 3 and 5 in the 5 range. The program grades on a 5-point college level scale. So 5 is extremely well qualified, 4 is well qualified, 3 is qualified, and it goes down to 2 and 1. So generally, AP scores of a 5, 4, and 3 are compared to college grades of an A, B, and C. So many colleges will award you 1 or 2 courses worth of credit if you score at least a 3 on the exam. And this is just a continuation on this slide as to the different exams that were offered to our students, and it gives you the numbers of who has the 4, 5s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. Now, it's highly encouraged that our students that are taking the AP classes actually take the AP exam. And we do have some students that don't take the AP classes and they actually take the AP exam as well. So you don't have to take AP to take it, but it's encouraged that, you do take that coursework. Okay, Scholastic Aptitude Test, the SAT. So this is probably familiar to most of us. It's a globally recognized college admission test that shows you shows colleges what you know and how well you're able to apply your knowledge. It tests your knowledge of reading, math, and writing. It also has subject tests that are taught, and these are basically your classes. Everything you've learned in high school is what should be on the Scholastic Aptitude Test. Most students take the SAT during their junior and senior year at Chelmsford High School, and almost all the college and universities use the SATs to make admissions decisions. So it's a test of skills of the reading, writing, and math. So in critical reading, it has the reading passages and sentence completions. Writing section includes short essays and multiple choice questions, identifying errors and improving grammar and usage. And in the math section includes arithmetic operations, algebra, geometry, statistics, and probability. So I think I've said this before, that Chelmsford High School is the largest test center in the Merrimack Valley for the College Board exams. During 2014-2015, there were 7 Saturdays that were offered for students for both PSATs and SATs. And Chelmsford High School average SAT scores for the class of 2015 continued to be higher than the national average and also the Massachusetts average. So, for example, in critical reading, Chelmsford scored 528, which is 12 points higher than the state average and 33 points higher than the national average. In math, Chelmsford students scored 552. The average was there, and it was 23 points higher than the state average and 41 points higher than the national average. And in writing, Chelmsford had a score of 512, which is 5 points higher than the state average and 28 points higher than the national average. So this just gives you a 4-year trend of what's been happening with our students. And last but not least, we have the ACTs, the American College Test. So this is a curriculum-based achievement test. It measures college and career readiness in English, mathematics, reading, and science. There's also an optional writing test. And it also has some non-cognitive components, which includes the high school course and grades, information, your interest inventory of what they would like to do, and a student profile section. So students basically earn 1 point for each correct answer, and they don't lose points for either omitting an answer or not answering, omitting or having an incorrect answer. And it's based on a raw scale out of 60, and then what they do is they scale that. The highest score that you can receive on the ACT is a 36, depending on the different different test. And they'll average them and put your final score together after you've taken all 4 of the components, or if you don't take the writing component. So this is a snapshot of our current scores. And what's interesting is if you can see how many students took it last year. So there was 109, and we haven't seen that spike for a while, since about 2011. So in talking to the high school staff too, we've noticed that a lot of the colleges, it's more like a West Coast test, and it's actually coming more to the East Coast. But a lot of the colleges around here are actually accepting it as an admissions requirement. So our students are actually taking the SATs and the ACTs at Chelmsford High School, so that's where we start to see that spike. And I gave you a lot of information, and now it's time for you to ask me a lot of questions.
Question about UDL.
Mm-hmm.
Is the certification transferable from, if a teacher comes into our district who's UDL certified?
It's not necessarily a certification, it's actually a concept in the guidelines. So if a teacher has had the training somewhere else in another district through CAST, or they took it through Fitchburg State, certainly they could be on board for getting a 21st century classroom. They would have to let us know, because I wouldn't have them on a list, that's all.
But they have some kind of paperwork that would certify that?
Yeah, they probably have PDP points, and it was either offered through their district, some type of a certificate from their district with their PDP points for what exactly it was for, or if they have college credit towards it, they could give us transcripts.
Thank you.
No problem.
Dr. Hirsch, can you go back to the SAT results?
Mm-hmm.
So, in 2012, from 2012 to 2015, in every one of the categories, we've gone down. Would you agree?
Which, at the high school level, what we do is when we do the data analysis, we look to see how many of our students are actually taking the test and what is being offered in the classes. So we don't offer an SAT prep class. We don't have a semester-long class that students can take. Typically, what they're doing is they're getting a lot of their their vocabulary development in their English classrooms, and math is obviously following their trajectory. So we're seeing the test scores go up in our MCAS results, our state accountability, but not necessarily in our SAT scores. So that is one of the things that I know that the high school is investigating, what's happening in the courses. Has there been a change? We haven't had any major changes, but we're trying to figure out what's happening. And is this, and when we drill down into that data, we look to see, you know, is it boys, girls, is there something that we're changing within our math core requirements that are happening? So that's something that the high school is investigating at this point. We have a council meeting on Wednesday, and we'll be discussing that.
Has the test itself changed?
The test is going to change, so any of our students that have already taken it this year are grandfathered in. Those test scores can go. But as of March 2016, the test is changing. It's a new SAT. So any of our students that just took the PSATs October 14th, they took the new PSAT. They took the PSAT 10.
I mean, there's some
10
pretty
minutes.
dramatic drops. You know, you have
Yep.
between 10 and 25% decreases. So if you could get back to us and just kind of educate us. You know, I get where they're still above average, but 550 to 528, 575 down to 552, that's a 20% decrease.
And we have to find out how significant
Yeah.
20 points is in the ratio.
And then if you were to go to the next one, which was the
ACT?
ACTs, I'm usually upbeat, but I look at this and do I not see something similar to this? I see in 2011 English 24.3, we're down to 22.5. I see math, slight increase, right? Reading decreased. Science, a slight increase. Decrease in composite. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong in that. And then when it comes to the ACT test, that is not a test that is familiar to a lot of the schools here. Like, we don't necessarily prep for the American College test. So that's something that high school council would be looking into as well.
Do we offer programs to help? What can we do to boost these grades up a little bit more, these test results a little bit more?
Well, in terms of the program of studies, we don't, like I said, we don't have an SAT course that's in there. We do know that there's a lot of prep companies that offer to students, you know, prep work, but we don't necessarily offer a course at the high school for this. It's
Would
not
we
in our
ever do
program
that,
studies.
Dr. Hirsch?
Say it again?
Would we ever do something like that?
Well, it depends, because we also have other requirements. We have the Mass Core requirements that our students have to take X amount of classes. They have to have a certain amount of credits in practical arts, fine arts, so it's a matter of fitting it into the program of studies, and you would need the staff to actually be able to teach that. So it's kind of a give or take.
I actually think our kids get enough practice taking standardized tests. I'd like to see, I think part of the issue here is we're looking at the data in a vacuum. All we're seeing are the are the scaled scores. We don't know if there have been, if it's rescaled annually or if it's only rescaled once in a while. I think a more interesting number might be how we are comparing to the state and national averages. If our average score is going down, but so is the state average score, and so is the national average score, that suggests it might be something to do with the test rather than the way we're teaching the kids.
What about the like
Conversely-
schools and like systems?
Well, you'll see some of the, when we speak at our council meetings, you'll see that a lot of the area districts are having the same type of scores. The other thing you have to take into account, when our students go to college, a lot of the SATs, there's a scaling too compared to your grade point average. So this is not stopping our students from getting into colleges, getting into good colleges, because what happens is the colleges scale the scores back based on what your GPA is. So say you scored lower in your SAT scores, but your GPA is higher, the college, and let's say, for example, their admissions was you have to have a 3.0. Well, if you had a 3.4 and your SATs were lower, you'd probably meet that 3.0. So there's more that goes into college admissions than just one test for our students. And it's true, we have to look at how that test is being administered. We don't know if they were doing testing questions to prep for the new SAT or the new PSATs, because that's what they do. They put in additional questions in the testing, and then as the students are taking them, they don't necessarily go towards the full score, but the kids had to still take those tests. They used to do this with MCAS too. They have to test out new questions, so they put it into the actual test, and our students are taking it, and some magical way, they figure out how to pull it out and then see how those students actually scored on them, so they can have actual new test questions.
I guess I'd just be interested to see how other systems like ours are scoring.
I could actually
Do
pull
that.
that off the DESI, because the one thing that they have on DESI right now is the set of scores. It's the average scores for each of the school districts. That's the only accountability that they have up there right now for 2015.
I'm with Sal, though. I think I'd like to hear more about what the working group finds. At least get a summary of their findings, if not a full-blown presentation. But I think he's right, that at least at first glance, there's a question here about what's happening, and if we're really gonna use these scores to inform teaching and inform our practice, then I think part of that is we have to answer questions like that.
We saw the same declines, though, on the MCAS. So, it could just.
In the MCAS, no.
Yeah,
Not in the advanced proficient, not at the high school level.
well,
The-
the slides were showing
the-
some scores were,
That was you had 3 through 10, though. He's saying just at the high school level.
Oh,
The high
okay.
school,
You're
the
focused-
trajectory of MCAS
Yeah,
typically goes straight up.
There is something going on with the MCAS at the lower levels. The high school advanced proficient numbers are much better than the elementary and middle school scores. My first thought on that is it's fine with me as long as they're catching up. I also wonder if the high school MCAS isn't designed to be more of a floor than really kind of stretch out the scores, since it's required for graduation.
I guess I just feel, based on where Chelmsford is right now and based on how positive we have for a school system, we set a real high bar. And when on the surface, and I'm speaking for myself, when I see numbers like that dip year after year, I want to set a high bar. I want our kids to go the other way. And what tools can we come together to give you in order to move that needle the other way? And just this appears on the surface to a layman a little odd, a little strange. And I'd like a little bit more information, Dr. Hirsch, if we could, please.
And we can talk to Tom Wright, who's our department guidance coordinator, who would probably have a little bit more information as to the testing for the students.
There were other schools in the state of Massachusetts that were in the top 50 in the country, correct? Could we see their trends? Would that be okay?
I would have to go search which ones are.
That'd be difficult.
It could be.
Whenever you get around to it, I apologize.
So time
Dr. Hirsch,
consuming.
Whenever you got around to it. I'd just like to see what our competition is all about, if they're moving in a different direction than us. If they're moving in the same direction, I guess we could have a conversation. Tests are different, things are different, okay, but if they're moving in one direction and we're in the same category as them, or competing, I like to call it competing, in the same category as them, then I want to know why we're moving in one direction and maybe they're moving in a different one,
Right.
for whatever it's worth. Thank you, Dr. Hirsch.
So I have a question on AP, because I know that a couple of years back, you noticed that there seemed to be, I thought it was calculus, the AP calculus course, was that the scores were lower, and you did an analysis to find out why the scores on an average were lower.
Right.
So that you could analyze what the content was of the curriculum that was offered.
Right, so like AP is a little different because we actually have the students and we offer the course.
Right, and that, so I'm bringing it to another level beyond the conversation about SATs and ACTs, in that this is what we are actually teaching, that when you take the AP course, it's designed to test about what they actually are learning. So my question is, because this only tells us what happened this year, do we have some information to find out what happened in other years with the same courses, provided that we have consistencies with the teaching and texts? And is there anything that stands out on any of the courses besides physics of APs that might indicate that we need to do something relative to any of those courses in order to change or teach differently in order to bring those levels up to more 4s and 5s than the 1s, 2s, and 3s? So that, my question is an analysis in terms of the APs. Because I know that's something we actually
they do that.
can affect change, more change.
Right, because we actually have the students, and we have a captive audience.
Right. But I would be also interested, sometimes we've seen like comparisons from year to year, when we have like a guidance report, just to see how things have trended.
And have you had a chance to see the guidance report? I can, I'll send you a copy of the guidance
Okay.
report too, because that would give you some of that
This year's
information.
guidance report, or is there a new one?
There's a new one. It's out.
We haven't had it, we haven't seen it.
Email that to you.
That was something we should have gone over. And there may be some other stuff in there I might have questions on.
I have a couple of questions about the proficiency gap. What are our numbers?
So in 2000, they've changed. So it depends on the grade level, it depends on the school. So last year, we were at 88.6, and we have to be at 97.7
For all students
for all students, and that's, again, a
by
whole district view.
2017?
Yes.
And we're not going to
And
make
we're
97.7.
No, I wouldn't necessarily say that, because they weight it. It depends. They weight it. So this year will be times 5.
Wait, what?
Times 6. So if you go back to, hold on, let me show you. Okay, did I go too far? I went too far. Oh, no. It's back. We'll get there.
No, that one, you
Oh,
had
yeah.
it there.
So, but no, it's one with the core indicators on it. If you
No,
look at-
no, I'm asking about that proficiency gap chart.
That's an example. That's not Chelmsford's, because we don't have Chelmsford's yet. We're waiting for that in December.
Well, no, we know what our targets are.
We know what our targets
We've
are.
known for some time.
Right.
Right? And how are we measuring up against the targets?
We're making, they said that we're meeting targets, except for some of our populations and some of our schools.
That's not what I'm seeing on the DESI page.
Are you on 2014?
I'm on 2014. If you look at,
It depends on if we're meeting target in a certain school.
well, all students, we've got a 65%.
Right, and we have to
Or
get a-
a 65 score, and on target is 75.
That was
And
for last year, so we have to see what the weighting is for this year to see if we're still on
See,
target.
I guess I don't understand what the weighting is. Either we're making that line or we're not, right?
Each year, though, they look at how you're making that line, and then what they'll do is
Right.
in 2011, it has a weight of 1, 2002, 2012,
Right,
it has.
and that's how they get the number on here, on the accountability sheet, because that's not the actual proficiency gap.
Correct.
Yeah, this is,
It's a lot of nuances and a lot of mathematics
it's
that goes
not.
into it.
Yeah, no, what it is obfuscation. I mean, either we're reducing the proficiency gaps or we're not. And in fact, that number for all students has been dropping the last couple of years. We're down from like, I don't know, we were around 70, it's dropped to 65. But I would assert that most of that problem is the fact that this is a completely unrealistic goal. And I don't understand why this is our main goal, to cut the proficiency gap in half. This was something that was imposed by the state. We chose to take it on, and we're not doing it.
And the thing is, though, if you look at that you're just talking about the composite performance index. That's why it's important to look at that student growth percentile, because there's a
But we didn't embed that in our goals for the district. What we embedded was that chart for the district.
We did, but
And-
we've embedded those goals at the department level. So that's why you've seen the increases in the SGP
Well,
every year at the
I
department
think
level.
that's the other thing that I'm not really that unhappy about the performances that I see reflected in these numbers, but I'm not very fond of the overall approach, because I have to ask, you've got the areas of development for the elementary schools, and I don't understand how those areas correlate or align with that particular curve. I understand why we'd want to focus on teaching our ELL kids a little bit more intensely. I understand why we'd want to do MTSS from kind of a general sense. But when we talk about aligning goals, that's our top level goal, and I don't understand how this stuff aligns with that. That's my rant for the evening. Well, it's my first rant for the
Okay.
evening. There may be more later.
Further discussion?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hurst. That was very informative. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
No problem.
Okay, next on the agenda is policy review.
No, resolutions.
Yes, at the last meeting, on October 6th, we started to review the MASC resolutions for 2 weeks from now. And there were 2 that we still had remaining.
Yeah.
That's okay, we're number 5.
Yeah.
There were still a few that we had some remaining questions on. Numbers 4 and 5.
Right. And you,
So we wanted to have further discussion on that.
yep, so I can give you more information. First, I gotta get to them. I don't have them.
No, I didn't see
Okay.
the new information.
No, did he include a copy of the other one?
Of the resolutions themselves, yes.
Yep. Here's my phone. All right, so on number 4, support for an equitable and sustainable placement program for students covered under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Assistance Act. This is very wordy because I reread it several times. I spoke to Glenn Kuchar. I also called Beverly Hugo, who sits on the Framingham School Committee, to see what her take was on it, and she basically said it was very wordy. The bottom line is they have, I don't know, 325, 350 homeless students in Framingham. And their concern is the financing aspect of it, plus all the other services, and how they're just coming in and they're getting dumped in by the state, by the federal government. It's also in other communities. And so when you get to the therefore be it resolved, and the rationale, what they want to do is to have MASC advocate and lobby for some kind of legislation to create a program, review what's currently there, and create a program of some sort that will be able to give homeless students their socioeconomic needs that they currently do not have, and to try to evaluate so that they're not moving them all over the place, the transportation costs. So instead of, say, like going from Lowell to New Bedford, that somehow or another they'd be able to be able to go to school in Bedford, because it would be the right thing to do rather than going back and forth all the time with transportation. So I tried to keep it simple. I told her if I could figure out how to simplify it, I'd make amendments to that to try to bring it down to something more simplified for the assembly. So all of this that's explaining it basically, all of that boils down to they want legislation, and it's all subject to appropriation. It's not just putting it out there. They've got to know where the money's coming from, of creating some kind of programming for these homeless students, whether they need food, whether they need guidance, some kind of social worker. They're finding there's a lot of, I wouldn't say gangs, but there's a lot of tension with different groups that are coming in from different areas when they come in from other countries, too. So it isn't just our homeless. She's also talking about people that are coming in from other countries that are also homeless. So I don't know if we want to support or not support having them lobby for legislation to put into place, again, subject to appropriation, any programming for dealing with homeless students. Do you know any more about things along those lines? Anything new?
No, I don't know anything new. The concept or the rationale, I mean, I agree with. The fact that, students are oftentimes caught in the middle of, the family's displaced, and you want to have consistency in their program and life, and so I absolutely get that piece of it. The difficult piece from the school administration point to the budgeting aspect is it's the timing issue. You don't know when these students are coming in, how long they're going to be in a particular community, what's going to be best for the student in the long run. If this legislation aims to try to tie in some kind of support systems for the state, to have them actually do some kind of a cost share for either the cost for educating the child in district or a cost share for the family, if they decide they're only going to be, say, here temporarily and they're going to be going back to another community, some kind of a cost share or reimbursement for the transportation costs for that student to go back to the original district. Those are the things that would be kind of important to us. Obviously, the welfare of the child is, but from a fiscal standpoint, again, just because we don't know the timing, when will the student come? How long will they stay? And then who will actually have to provide the funding for either in-district programming or, say, transportation to a district. I do know oftentimes, the students will require some extra supports, and depending on the numbers that might move into a particular community, we have a couple of hotels in town that do take students in, and they may have some Lowell students, Billerica, Chelmsford, or whatnot, and other districts will actually send additional services into, say, that hotel to provide after-school, say, tutoring and enrichment programming for the kids, because it is pretty tough to be, living in a hotel for extended periods of time. But where does the funding for that really come? So if the aim of this legislation or this resolution is to try to kind of poke at that issue, I certainly would be supportive. I just think there are more questions than answers at this point with regard to how to actually properly educate and care for and have the funding for these students.
It seemed to me, though, that this particular resolution was more on the socioeconomic situation rather than on the financial, the educational financial situation, which we are more concerned about. Not that we're not concerned about the child, but we want to make sure that we have the financial ability to be able to educate that child and transport the child also, and not at the detriment of our own students, which many times that can happen. It hasn't necessarily happened here to any great extent, but it is in others. I also asked her, because of the way that this was approached in terms of the socioeconomic pieces, that a lot of it's coming down from the federal government, that they should be lobbying at the federal level rather than at the state level, because we're getting a lot more push to take more students, but it's not necessarily from the state. So they're coming in from other places. So there's a lot of pieces to this, and I think that it's very, because of how much is stated, it's not simple to try to figure out exactly what's going on here, even though I asked an awful lot of the questions. So if we want to keep it that I can ask the questions on the floor and find out, or if I come up with some kind of amendments in order to simplify this, if we can keep it with the cost sharing by the state or federal grants or something like that, and the reimbursement for transportation in order to maintain that, and then have other programmings and or reviews, because they didn't even put in that they wanted to review what the whole program was to see if the DESE wanted to do regulation. So I think there's a lot in here of more questions than there are answers for where we may want to go. So it's at the discretion of the committee what they want to do. If they want to leave it open, or you want to just say no because there's too many questions and it appears to be more complicated than we want to address, or it's not simplified enough, or it's, more socioeconomic than financial. I don't know. If people have other questions?
I have a question, and maybe Mr. Cohen can answer it. I heard that the Board of Health has adopted some restrictions. Is that true with respect to the homeless population in town?
I learned last week that the Board of Health has sent notice to the hotel operators that they've adopted regulations regarding I guess what essentially could be described as the length of stay that one can remain in a hotel facility, because the Radisson and the
Best Western.
Best Western were not constructed nor operated as extended stay hotels, much like the one we have up in Drum Hill. And so they've applied the state standards as well as the local standards in terms of duration that one could stay in a facility. And I understand that those provisions will become effective in a few months for the existing students and families, and then are universal at the current time for new families. So yes, I was notified by one of the hotel operators. They're very concerned with this. They're having discussions with the Board of Health director and with the board. I notified the superintendent because I think it may have some impact on the students in the system. So I think it remains to be seen how this will get resolved over the next few weeks. But there is, and the concern I have, and as you can imagine, I think it's probably shared by everybody in the room, is, well, how does this sort of ripple statewide? I mean, state standards obviously pertain not only to Chelmsford, and also we know that there are concerns in other communities. So I think this will I do understand that the state has been brought into these discussions, and we'll have to see how it plays out over the next several weeks, few months. I don't imagine there'll be anything imminent before the end of this calendar year, but like I said, I would think that you may see something starting perhaps as early as January. It involves not only the dimensions of the room, but also the whole issue of life safety. So that it also involves the fire department and so forth. Because, if you and I were going to a hotel, we'd bring a couple suitcases and such. Well, if it's a case for an extended stay, they're bringing everything they've got, and that becomes the whole question of safety within the rooms in terms of habitation, adequate facilities for preparing of foods and so forth. So I think this will remain to be played out in the weeks and probably a few months ahead.
Some of these families have been there for years. So,
Yes.
I mean, my concern, though, is that we are now putting a 30-day limit, so what are we going to do? Are they just going to be shuffled from hotel to hotel, back and forth? That just seems disruption for the sake of disruption.
Right. Yes, we just don't know, but obviously we know the state standard, and it has been for a couple of years, is the goal is to have these families have permanent residences outside of a hotel. I mean, it's not a
Right.
place where you want to raise a family.
Right.
And certainly the people who are residing there don't want that to be their permanent home either. So I think it's the whole overall effort of eliminating homelessness. From the state's perspective, obviously, they don't want to put children into shelters. Nobody wants to see that. So the question becomes, how can the state work to provide permanent homes in a suitable location? And I think probably what you're getting at from the local level is, and probably from other levels, is an impatience with this. This was never meant or envisioned to be a permanent solution, as you described. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And again, I think, in Chelmsford, again, where the Board of Health is elected, they're an independent authority. And so I think that you'll really clearly see the focus on them in the weeks and months ahead, and obviously the dialogue with the local hotel operators as well as the state officials.
Thank you.
Just one more question, Paul.
Yeah.
So, I just want to come back to Barbara's point, because I get that our local state board is getting involved, but calendar year is a couple months away. I mean, could we potentially, want to drill down a little bit more, we potentially talking about disrupting these families
Yes.
before Christmas?
I don't think it'd be before Christmas, but I would anticipate that you may see something in January if the current regulations remain in effect and are enforced. And I think oftentimes local officials and certainly residents don't have a clear understanding of the authority that a local Board of Health has. They are the most powerful authority in a community in terms of they can, in a variety of areas, in terms of, habitation of a dwelling, and obviously in this case, habitation in hotels. So yes, that is the concern, and I think that's why you did not see the Board of Health take an imminent action saying, okay, you've got 7 days to comply or 14. They sent out the written notice a couple weeks ago, and I think they're basically giving them advance notice that this will have to be adhered to. And again, now, and I think it obviously caught the attention of the local operators, but I would think, like I said, I would think it would not happen during the holidays, but if the indications that I see is it may happen after the holidays.
Well, I can see that you take this very serious. I can see it in your face and your body language. I think this is terrible. I mean, they just can't do something like this, and I don't know what. Speaking for myself, I don't. We need to react to this, and we need to understand and get in front of this, because to allow a family to do this and then tell them over 60 days or 90 days, guess what? you got to go find somewhere else to go. I mean, these kids are going to go into shelters, and that's just not an option.
And as I
They
said,
have to stand down until these
Right.
families figure this out.
and I think that's what, the dialogue is happening. As I said, the authority lies with the elected Board of Health. I think the bigger concern, and obviously was a state concern, because, these concerns of the habitation are not limited to Chelmsford. And you know how local government works. Somebody comes up with a quote-unquote solution, if that's how it's deemed to be the Board of Health addressing to that, then it becomes a game of replication. And then the question then becomes, where are they at? And that's why I said I think the answer is ultimately going to be with the state. It's going to either be through the legislature or through the state agencies on how to address this, because despite the authority that any local board has, all local authority, as we know in the Commonwealth, comes from the state and from the state legislature. So what I suspect is going to happen, Sal, is it's going to end up being a legislatively driven resolution to this problem.
But our board won't act independent. They
are so
will-
far. They are so far. I'm not aware of the. I only became aware of this once I saw the information from one of the hotel operators, and I guess apparently they had hearings in August, September, but yet the hotel operators weren't notified of the hearings, and at this point they've issued the letters and the regulations. And now now the dialogue has begun from the pushback from the hotel.
Does our state
operators.
legislators know about this?
Yes, because once I learned of it, I notified my response to the notification was, look, if you have concerns, you ought to be reaching out to our legislative delegation, and they did do that, and they also reached out to the state agencies, because again, this is not a Chelmsford phenomenon in terms of the overall housing issue, but it is apparently a Chelmsford initiative at the local level in terms of a pushback. As I said, I think ultimately it's going to come from the legislature and/or the state agencies on how to resolve this issue, because clearly the contracts with the hotels are with the state. I mean, let's understand who's paying the bill and also where the contracting authority is coming from. And now you have the local level pushing back, saying, well, no, that's not how, how those units were built in accordance with state standards. So this is almost like the local calling the state on not complying with the state standards for habitation in hotels. That's why they have different categories in the state about what's an extended stay hotel and what's an overnight vacation hotel and so forth. And you can imagine some of the issues that the Board of Health was concerned about the local level, where again the issues that range from things from bed bugs to
Fire safety. I get it.
to people of non-legal authority living of a different gender living in close confinement. There's oftentimes you get people living in one room that aren't family members and so forth. So it's to be fair, you can see the balance of concerns that are going across the board, but it is very unsettling, and that's for us. You can imagine what it must be like, as you said, for the families who are involved. And I don't know if they've been notified yet, honestly. I don't know how much this has been conveyed to, as you say, the people who are, already at in an uncomfortable position in terms of their being homeless and now being perhaps threatened, as you said, having to relocate.
I just don't understand why or how the board can take that kind of an action, without vetting this out a little bit more and bringing the state officials into play to displace or to potentially scare families at a time like this after allowing it for so many years. You can't allow for all these years and then all of a sudden say, you got 90 days. Right. That's just not the way it works, And as far as fire safety, we can, there could be a fire watch there, or there can be other remedies, but we have to give these people enough time to kind of figure this out. And I'm sure as far as from a school's perspective, Dr. Lang, and I'm sure the students that are becoming a fabric of our school system to be taken out of the school system potentially, that can't be good for the entire student body,
or to be transported from wherever. I mean, that's a whole other expense. But you're right, it is very disruptive, and as I said, it's going to remain to be played out over the next few months.
Lori Myers know this.
There's a lot of people that know it. That's why you have the advocacy that's coming from MASC
this been in the newspapers?
to try to,
Not this specific.
not this specific thing, but you
Is
you
that
have
the
advocacy.
intent, Evelyn, of this resolution, is to put focus on these kind of,
They've been doing this for several years in terms of homeless. 3 or 4 years we've had resolutions in order to try to bring awareness of what's going on with homeless. We're addressing it in terms of the educational aspect and the financial aspect of it because of the impact that we have on our district when they come in, because we're not given very much notice, and it has nothing, the budget impact, we can't calculate that. It's an unknown. So,
We can calculate that. We
calculate
know what,
Well,
we know
we
what
can,
it
but
costs
not
the
when we had-
district to transport, and we know what
But the
the
year that we
loss in
had the
revenue to
50
the town
right,
is.
but
think
the year
because
we
the
had the
state-
50
because the
students
state
come
doesn't
in,
pay the
that was a
hotel
big
tax.
impact.
It's getting a little,
Yeah, there was a big impact that first time when we had a big hit of 50 students, and it was at the end of August, and we couldn't anticipate that kind of impact to our budget. We can have some and put contingencies in there if we want to for that. However, MASC has been trying to use their advocacy, their lobbying positions over several years for this topic. That's what I wanted to try to say.
And I think part of the concern was
Simply.
where the concentration was. Like, for example, the town of Bedford had an extraordinary number of students, and then they began a big effort of convening meetings and such, trying to say, why are they receiving a large number of students, but it didn't seem to be equally dispersed.
Well, that's like with Framingham, when she told me that there's
Exactly.
approximately, say, 350 homeless students
Exactly.
there.
Right.
And how much their free and reduced lunch has increased. So it used to be 33%, now it's more than half
Right.
in that one community, and they don't understand why it's all going there either. But if this particular, to get back to the resolution, if this particular resolution was only solely based upon an analysis of what we're talking about, and to take a look and have a commission or a review of it, that's one thing. This is wanting to have socioeconomic programs funded to be able to support the students when they are placed, so that it isn't completely a burden on the school system, but also so that you don't have children in shelters. They want to force legislation somehow to create areas or to build buildings so that they can be in them.
you'd think are going to pay for those programs, because it's not going to
Paul,
come from the state.
what can we do
Well,
on the short term?
I
to-
understand that was my
to
issue with this.
support this?
I think the first thing to do is reach out to the Board of Health and
Yeah.
try to, and sort of maybe you have one of them perhaps appear at a future meeting and explain, what's behind the regulations, where they're at. And then I think the other one is to talk to the state officials, in terms of
State
a legislative delegation, as well as, the state agencies, regarding Department of Education and probably Housing and Community Development that are dealing with the placement of these students and families.
If there's a legislative fix for this, it needs to happen very
Real quick.
quickly, because if we're talking about people being displaced in January, at that point, the budget cycle is going to have begun in earnest. You really need to have a solution in place before Christmas, probably, and that's,
And we know the legislative calendar, they finish the third week of November by statute. They go on recess from the third Wednesday in November till after the first of the year. So if something's going to happen, it's going to happen in a month.
Dr. Lang, any opinion on this, sir?
No, I mean, there's really the educational piece, which I've been kind of following, and then there's obviously the other piece, the kind of the human side to it, and who's going to support these families. With regard to the resolution, I don't think it's asking necessarily for bad things. It's leaving a lot of questions out there. Educationally, when these students, come into the community, it's actually much easier for us to accept them in and actually enroll them in our schools, have there be that stability. It's less costly because, they already are in our community to transport them, say, in district as opposed to out. So there's advantages to actually just kind of accepting them in. I think part of the resolution would aim at, what are those minimum time periods, what are maximum time periods that would allow us to work on that. One piece that really isn't stressed in here that I don't know how it would be studied, but could be included in the factor, is almost some kind of a proration of the cost for these students, because it does touch on the fact that if a homeless child comes into the district after October 1st, our numbers are already into the state, our Chapter 70 is fixed for that following year. We're not getting any financial funding for that particular student. But maybe in the case of homelessness, if the state could recognize that there is some kind of transiency among this group, that they, instead of just looking at October 1, maybe they do it every other month type look. They do something like they do with the charter school kids, and over the course of 3 or 4 times a year, they actually assess which district these students are in, and actually then try to put some of the funding back to those districts who are fiscally responsible for the students. That would be helpful. I don't know if this resolution aims to do that. But even if it comes up on the floor, that could be something to talk about as, being worthwhile.
Jay, why does this feel like maybe I'm thinking the wrong way, Dr. Lang, and Mr. Chairman, maybe we could invite some of our state and local legislators to a meeting to discuss this, along with, to Paul's point, the Board of Health, because this sounds like something that we have to react pretty quickly on. Would you agree, sir?
Yes, I would. Just to go back to the resolution, I think that that's an outdated resolution with this new information. I mean, because my original comments, because I dealt with the situation, I think that one of the things that they were talking about in general terms, and I'm using my own terms, but I think there are 2 factors in having these placements successful. One is cultural. When we had kids that came in with at least a somewhat similar cultural experience, it was successful. If someone comes in from a situation that's totally different, we had one student that I remember specifically, he could have come from Mars. I mean, he was so far different in that. So I think that placement is really important, and I think eliminating huge transportation, which is part of this whole thing, so that it's nearby, similar background. I mean, I'm not talking about it. Somebody can't come out of a poor city situation, but if he comes out of a poor city situation with a gang background and he comes to Chelmsford High School, it's like, I can tell you from my brief experience, it's like night and day. It's a huge challenge. So I think that the way I see it, and I think it's along what Sal's talking, is that we have a huge political situation here, because I honestly think, in Paul's brief comments, that the Board of Health probably did the right thing, and that their responsibility is to protect the citizens and so forth. And maybe in a long-term hotel with a kitchenette or whatever, you got a chance. But you got people, they're going to have hot plates. They're going to have all of this electrical overload, if nothing else. And I think that their action, while it puts us in a very difficult position, is probably right from their viewpoint. The problem is that goes directly against the kinds of things that the school committee organizations looking for. They're looking for getting somebody in a good placement where they can be assimilated into the school and be successful. And to pull them out every 60 days or whatever is just directly contrary to that. So I see this whole thing as a direct political conflict between the direction that it seems that the Board of Health has gone in our case, and the educator's view of what would be best for the kids. And so I don't know how we deal with that down there, but I think that that's the message that we have to take down there, in addition to taking local action. I'll bet you anything that the bulk of people down there won't have heard about this before.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if they had heard about it, Beverly would have told me, because
Yeah.
she's up on all kinds of stuff.
So I think, maybe we could work on some language and chuck that one.
How do we do this, Dr. Lang? How do we do this, Mr. Chairman? Do members of the board reach out to the state delegation? How do you want to do this in the right way that you feel?
It has to be quick, because the legislature's done toward the end of next month. And so we have, one meeting before that, maybe 2.
Well, we can always have a special one if we need
Yeah,
to.
I know.
I don't even know if
it's
it's
urgent.
I don't even know if it's about the money right now. We need to settle this. This pot is
Yeah.
overflowing right now. We need to settle this down and to settle these families down and then come up with a real plan and then go potentially ask for the money. I don't know if in the next 30 or 45 days you're going to get any funding. I just think we need to say, okay, your plan, and we get why you're doing it, to your point, safety reasons and other issues, but guess what? Stand down, stop, let's come up with a plan, and then manage to the plan. How do we do that, like tomorrow?
Yeah, I truly, on this one, and I'm not trying to have to defer to you, I don't understand the political dynamics of, say, the Board of Health or the rationale that went into it, or kind of that governing body. I don't know that yet. I think, I mean, just kind of speaking off the cuff, it'd be important perhaps for this body to, say, meet with the Board of Health and try to understand, what went into their thought process. Was there any consideration given to even kind of grandfathering existing people that were already there? Some kind of a stopgap measure, because the kids that are already there, are being currently taken care of. I understand maybe wanting to change things going forward or not, continue to add. That isn't probably the best solution long-term. But I don't know if those kind of discussions have taken place. Again, I don't overstep, but I don't think it'd be inappropriate for the school committee to perhaps meet with the Board of Health and try to understand kind of the rationale they're thinking and, who they got input from, and at least make our pitch as, on a local level. I think that'd be the easiest. If they were ever going to take something into consideration or do something differently, they would have that power. If ultimately the committee didn't agree with that action and then it became a legislative matter, it's going to take some time. And I think that's the issue, just given the whole sensitivity of their schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to volunteer.
I've got good news and bad news. Looks like there's a Board of Health meeting on November 4th.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to volunteer to reach out to all the legislators tomorrow.
Oh, you know what?
Board
I'm
of
sorry.
Health
That's a very old one. Never mind. I just Googled Board of Health on the town meeting website and it came up. I'm not seeing anything in the next month, actually, that's already posted.
I'd like to
I don't know what their normal meeting
volunteer
schedule is.
to do this. Any of the board members would like to jump on.
Maybe
but
the
I think
2nd.
we should start making calls tomorrow
Is that November 2nd?
and then report
It's
back up
easy.
to you immediately.
November
And
2nd
Dr.
could be
Lang.
done.
Are you comfortable
Because I think,
with the direction of the comments you're going to make?
I'm comfortable to learn about this
Yeah.
in the next 24 hours as much as I can, and then to hold my breath and stamp my feet until legislators and the Board of Health listens to what Dr. Lang just said and to how this board feels.
Well, I'd put it on
We
an
need some
emergency
answers.
level.
Yeah, I would agree. And if anybody wants
And
to,
the
start
two
making
things are
calls.
directly opposite as far as I'm concerned.
ridiculous.
Turning over every 30, 60, whatever it is, days, and developing continuity, they're directly opposite.
Well, I'm sorry, do we know what their instructions were?
Sounds like by the end of the year, transitions have to be made. It appears, Paul, and maybe I'm incorrect in that statement.
we pull up the regulations require that becomes effective on or after September 1st as to new placements and on January 1st, 2016 for existing placements. Goes into the it provides all the requirements in terms of square footage, number of people, or maximum stay per room, type per occupancy number. For a single room, one person would be 19 days. 4 people in a single room would be 7 days. A single room with kitchenette would be 90 days. For 4 people in a single room with kitchenette would be 30 days. A single room with full kitchen would be 120 days. One person and 4 people would be 30 days.
Another thing,
Yeah,
Sal,
that's going
Could
to
you
be.
forward that, Paul, to us?
I just forwarded it to you, and I
Th-
forwarded
thank
it
you,
to
sir.
everyone. So
Thank you.
You
Yes,
should
sir.
have
I
that.
just wanted to share with you that if they move kids every 7 days, they show up and you have to enroll them immediately. They don't have to bring health records or anything else.
That's the part of the issue that they
Yeah,
have in this
so
this
the-
resolution.
If they're moving every 7 days, so we get a kid settled, and just about the time we get him settled, he's going to a different school.
Do you just understand the impact on that family? I mean,
Well, and the
they
whole,
come
and
from
the
broken
whole,
homes to begin with.
in the districts that get large numbers of these people, they're going to have to set aside several people to just deal with this.
But I think what's happening in practice the board has made a decision, the board is trying to deter the hotels from accepting these contracts with the state. So I don't think the board anticipates the hotels are going to want to flip families every week because of the lag time, paperwork and all that.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it very unattractive for the hotels to actually take in families. So
I think that's
in reality what's
that's
happening.
one thing going forward, but I think the real sticky point here is the people who are already here. I mean, it would be one thing if they were to say, look, we're not taking anybody after September 1st, and any new rentals would have to adhere. But it's another to say that, hey, even the ones who are here and have been here in some cases for some time need to vacate by the end of January.
By the end of January, by the.
Well, if they're,
Some of them
I
get
think he said for existing, yeah,
First of
17
January.
days.
1st of January.
1st of January, we're going to implement it, and
Right.
17 days later, any more than one person, you're out.
well, they
Am I
could at
wrong,
least
Paul?
move them to a
Right.
kitchenette, I suppose,
Right.
but.
Yeah, but we don't have as many in
Right.
Chelmsford.
We'll do this right away, sir. We'll get back to you right away.
The Board of Health appears to meet the first Monday of every month. I'm just looking back at the
Yeah.
history. So they must have a meeting a week from Monday on the 2nd.
Second?
Yeah.
I don't know who's on the Board of Health or what, but perhaps we could talk in the interim and even,
The other thing would be to invite the chair or all of them to our second meeting in October.
November.
Or,
Second meeting in
We've done,
November.
this is the second
oh,
one.
this is the
This is our
second.
second
Second meeting in October. Yeah.
Sorry.
That goes fast.
Yeah, then you know what, their meeting's the first, isn't it?
Right.
At some point, I mean, if necessary, we can request, an opinion from legal counsel or the Attorney General's office on, maybe they're not aware of this.
Or that,
Seek an injunction or
yeah,
something.
they may be aware of it, but
Solid.
they're not aware of that it's going to be implemented,
Right.
because it hasn't been.
You know what, Evelyn? There's the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do. The right thing to do is moving forward, let's implement something that, okay, from this point on,
Find
no
something that
more.
makes sense.
But
This
you
isn't
know
making any
what
sense.
they're doing? They're scaring a bunch of people,
Right.
Evelyn, and that in and itself, that's the wrong message that we as a community need to send out, that we're going to scare or get ready or, you know what? And we don't, to get injunctions and do all that, I mean, that seems so like the wrong approach to take. I mean, this shouldn't even
But
be.
we may have to consider
Yeah, I
that,
mean,
just
well,
to
it's-
stop it for a while.
The fact that we're even discussing this is
I know,
is
it's-
nauseating.
Well, no, the
Yeah.
fact that we're discussing it is a step forward, right? If we weren't discussing it, we'd be getting taken by surprise. So this is a step forward. I think Al sussed it out pretty well. The Board of Health has their priorities, we have our priorities. They're not always gonna be the same. And the reason we have a political system is so that we can work out those differences by sitting down and talking with each other and that would be better than an injunction.
It would be, but if they're going to, if there's a case where we need to just say, wait, we need to, stall this.
But let's start by talking. I think that's an excellent idea.
We
Let's
have to
get
get
all the
information
legislators
first.
as soon as possible to hear this. I'm sure they will react very quickly. I mean, this is,
Should we ask, therefore, to be on their agenda at that meeting?
What, if we go to the Board of Health?
Yeah, I
Well,
think,
it's their meeting in that day. I mean, it's a little
Right, and we don't know
presumptuous.
whether or not it is public input. I haven't seen an agenda. I haven't accessed it.
I'd be shocked if it wasn't on their agenda, because I believe the hotel operators and their council are coming to them, and I understand there are already some informal meetings taking place.
All right.
So I would
Plan to
be
go to
shocked
that
that it's not on their agenda for
Yeah.
November 2nd.
Well, I think as a courtesy, maybe, I'd call Richard Day and tell him that we're concerned and ask,
Will you do
we'll
that,
have
Mr.
him know that
Oh,
we're
well, you
going to be
can-
there.
are you going to
Do
do that,
that.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
I'll do that.
So you'll call them,
Yeah,
and then I can certainly tomorrow, and if anybody wants to jump on board, I mean, we can go to our state representatives on this, call them immediately, forward them this email. I guarantee you they don't know this, and just start talking about it and start to build a coalition. Would that be okay with you, Dr. Lang and Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Sure. They may know about it, but I don't doubt they have the full implication of what it means. You know, they may have gotten a flyer or something, but I know that they wouldn't get the full meaning of this.
Paul, do you know, is there anyone from the, like the town working with, I guess it's two hotels?
Yeah, it'd be
On
the
this
Radisson
matter?
and the Best
The
Western.
Best Western, but is there anyone from the town kind of as a liaison between the Board of Health and the hotel's concerns, or?
Can I just say, if you didn't say anything,
When this first started happening, when Dr. Yeoman was here,
I'm just saying.
there were a significant number of people, I don't know,
It's on my list.
and the schools actually helped form, I don't know, formally were committees to provide clothing and basic necessities to get through that, and so we got through that time, but then there was no carryover. We did well at that time. So it was more of an issue when Dr. Yeoman was here, and then it kind of quieted down again. So there is a background to this.
If there's a background, Mr. Chairman, then this is what I have to say. I'm sure in the last week or so, or prior to this whole conversation, I'm sure we didn't invent these new rules. They were already in existence with safety issues and some of these other
Yeah.
issues that the Board of Health's hanging their hat on. So they've allowed this, or there's been a body that has allowed this for a very long time, years and years.
Yes.
And to all of a sudden draw a line in the sand today and say, man, oh man, you got 30 or 60 days or 17 days. That's not how you handle a situation like this.
Okay.
These are not new laws.
Right.
And if this was the case, why did you allow this to happen for years and years? And all of a sudden now it's an issue, and it's a time-sensitive issue.
Okay. So I think, I don't know what we're going to do when we get down to the Cape, but I think we have direction in terms of what we're going to do here with what Sal's doing. I'll get in touch with Richard Day and ask to be part of that meeting, or tell them that we're going to be there if they've already scheduled something.
So we're just going to leave it, we're not voting on this, because
No.
it's too,
We'll leave it to your
yeah,
discretion.
thank you. Because this is confusing. It was confusing even talking to Beverly.
I think the biggest role we
Thank you,
can
Paul.
play, if
Thank you
they
very
don't
much,
know
Paul.
about this situation, the biggest role we can play is to tell them.
Right, just to inform them.
Forget what the resolution is, just make other people aware.
Right, which I can do that
Yeah.
from the school committee viewpoint,
Okay.
about getting that information out. Because I have those contacts. So the legislation is one, because that's what would cause a stalling or further regulation. But if all school committee members know that this is going to happen in their communities with their homeless, maybe that is a very large body within the state that can put pressure not just on our 4 people, but on all of
Well, it'd be
theirs.
also interesting if we could find out if this is an idea that's spreading within the boards of health, or whether it was
Exactly.
just
You know.
our one community. I seriously doubt it was just, it's going to be just that one community.
Well, and Sal,
edge.
you're the alternate, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you might have something to say to them as well, just bringing some feedback, what you learned talking to the state legislators, and maybe even giving them some advice about how to talk to their own if they're interested in doing something like that, if a situation like this
I agree, Mike.
arises in their town.
I agree, and we'll do that. Thank
Okay.
you, Paul.
Yes, that was very important.
Wow.
You
Have
never
we
know
got
where
one
this is going
more?
to, yeah, we have one more. Hopefully, this will be much faster. The one that's on 5 is tax reform ballot question. So there's information that is not here. The information is that what they want to do is to have a different amount of tax on people who have personal income over $1 million on the state income tax. So anyone making under $1 million stays at whatever the rate is, 5%, 5.25%. Anybody making over $1 million is an additional 4% in order to gain revenue.
On the
And they want to put it on
income
the ballot.
over $1 million.
Yes.
Not on all.
So they would have 9% plus, and people under.
Over $1 million.
Yes. So it's kind of like graduated tax income reform, but it's only 2 levels. So it's not ranges. So
Right.
that's what this is,
Which one is this, Evelyn? I'm-
5.
Number
All
5.
right. Why
So they-
is the school committee board?
Well, this was, again, in terms of discussing this with Glenn Kuchar and with Beverly, who's going to be the vice president of the board of directors. They had I wouldn't say dissension, but there was an argument in terms of the board of directors that this should not be done by school committees, this should be done by other PACs or something along those lines. And it wasn't a unanimous decision by the board of directors to support this either, any more than it was on the resolutions committee. I personally don't like something like this because it's a slippery slope. If you were to take that percent income and tie it to legislation, statute, and regulation that says that all that money goes to education only, and that any change in that has to be a vote of the people in Massachusetts, that would be one thing. But I've watched where they have taken and added new taxes and sold them on the basis of new programs. We had the drug-free schools grant that we used to have quite a while ago. It was funded by an increase in the cigarette tax. Oh, we had all this money and we were going to do all of this stuff with it. Okay, well, all of a sudden, as the state budget got less and less money came to us as grants, and gradually it disappeared because it wasn't tied to any particular form of legislation. It was like a promise.
The board of MAC go into a room and think of this?
No, this is
No.
a tax ballot question. This is the Raise Up Coalition that they're putting
Okay.
together. They're bringing this forward as a
Okay.
ballot question in 2018.
Okay.
So there's
So they'd be
not
joining a
everybody.
larger group.
Not everybody on on the board of MASC does the resolutions. It's a subcommittee, like our policy subcommittee, our finance subcommittee, and then what they do, and there's more members to it, kind of like your maintenance was. And so all of those other people and school committee members come together, and then they formulate this. That's when you see this sponsored by, and it says MASC Board of Directors. Then we all vote on it.
What are we looking to do tonight?
I just want you to tell me, and you don't have to, I mean, you can just tell me to do it on my own discretion. When I go to the General Assembly, do I represent that Chelmsford said, yeah, we support this? Or do I say Chelmsford says they don't want to support it?
This is so, with all due respect, this is so loose.
Well, I agree
fact
with
of the
you,
matter is
because I'm not
that-
going to vote for this.
Right, we could support this, but, the legislature can take the money in, they're not gonna give it to us,
You
I
know,
understand that.
Yeah.
Are you gonna, not you, but are they,
Well, again, they reference investing not only in the state educational system, but also the social and infrastructure
that's-
systems as well.
No.
Not that there's not a need to build, to get the bridges in a little bit better shape, and the dams for
That's
that
not our
matter,
job.
but
I'd like to see them get their act together better as far as their current budget goes before they would put more money at it, throw more money at them, but
no, they're not even promising it's gonna go for the kids.
Right.
I agree with you.
You want a motion on this, Evelyn?
You can do, yes.
I'd like to make a motion not to support resolution, was it 5?
Yeah.
Yes.
I second.
This has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye.
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 You know, tonight.
Those opposed?
nay. I like it.
Okay,
Okay.
it's all right. We'll let you stay. All right. Quarter
Thank you
one.
very much.
Quarter
I'm not a
one. Thank you.
millionaire yet. Don't expect to be one in the next.
By the way, just because I bring forward something for discussion
How old
doesn't
is
mean
Edward?
I support it. I need your opinion on it. It will happen often that way.
We know that.
I will let you know specifically.
Okay, moving along.
School committee policy review and updates.
Okay. The first policy that we have this evening is 1301.01. This is the field use policy. There's some minor changes in this. As you can see, this was originally adopted in the year 2007, so it's not a very old policy. So obviously, before school committee, we're putting Chelmsford. When you see the third one down, it talks about, we've just cleaned up the language on it. We've added illegal drugs, use of tobacco products. We don't want them to bring them in, consume them, or sell them in the buildings. So we've kind of brought everything up to date and then changed the appropriate titles that have changed from the business manager in this particular one. Does anybody have any questions?
Does the Director of Community Education receive and process the applications following appropriate deadlines, issue permits, collect fees, and prepare an annual report related to the use of the fields?
This is something that has been a discussion as far as having an annual report, because we haven't had an annual report for quite a while, number of years, in terms of what we had when we first initiated this particular policy. So if we have it in the policy in order so that school committee members will know what is going on. What we can do in reading this policy currently is to have request that on a future agenda, that the Director of Community Education and any other people that rent our facilities, this may overlap somewhat, it's not supposed to overlap with the turf fields. That's something new that happened after we did this policy.
So you're saying this policy doesn't apply to turf fields?
It can now. It can now. But we didn't put that in there. Because at the time, we had regular fields. Just the regular fields, the McCarthy fields, the high school fields. And they didn't rent the football field, which now is a turf field. And they didn't rent McCarthy Track because it was not in good shape, in good condition.
I mean, it was not suitable to even walk on.
Yes, I understand. I was trying to be nice.
Lacrosse used it, right?
Field.
The field.
Yeah.
So they did rent it.
But if they rented it, I don't know when they rented it and to whom they rented it, because I don't recall any of those reports letting us know what they did or they didn't. Now,
Well-
there's another piece to this, okay? The other piece is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the sixth paragraph down. Town youth groups will be allowed to enter into partnership agreements in lieu of fees. They do. The Chelmsford School Committee authorizes the athletic director, maintenance supervisor, and director of community education to enter into contracts with any organization or group requesting the use of our fields or courts. Written agreements developed cooperatively with the youth group representatives and so forth with the other list. They include, but not be limited to, times, locations requested, and explanation of funds or maintenance in exchange in lieu of fields. There may be an agreement that will have a partial fee included in the value, with the value of maintenance. And then it goes further through this. For instance, CYBL, when they have a certain fee that they pay to us to use the buildings, they have also put up a scoreboard. That's a value added. We didn't pay for that. They did the floors. We didn't pay for that. That's value added. My issue with having this policy is that it hasn't been implemented, in that we want an accounting of all the value added so that we will know what it is that we're gaining by having these other organizations in there. But that's a different discussion. We're just discussing the changes in the policy.
Who's the maintenance supervisor?
We don't have, the maintenance supervisor would be like Gary Persichetti.
So we're authorizing town personnel to rent out school fields?
That's who the maintenance supervisor is now. If you think you want us to rework this policy, I will go back.
I think we need to start from square one on this.
Now that we've
We
asked
don't-
all these questions and had discussion?
Look, policy is only useful if it documents active practice. I think the fact that it's come up in the queue is useful. It reminds us that that the policy no longer reflects current practice. I think we need to know what the current practice is, and then once we get informed about that, we can talk intelligently about, is that the practice we want to keep, or do we want to make some adjustments to this? This is, again, I think this is probably best delivered to Ms. Cresta and Dr. Lang with a request that they report back to us in a timely manner. I'll leave it to the rest of the committee to talk about what timely means here. But I'm certainly not ready to
Oh, that's fine.
pass this as it is tonight.
I assumed that maintenance supervisor meant when we had a maintenance supervisor.
Right, but we should have changed, we needed to change it when we.
Well, you never know in the future if you'd have one again. I just thought, because it was one of 3 people that could do it, I just thought it got left on as a potential person.
Yeah, I think we may have had one back the last time this was, I guess,
It was
adopted.
adopted in 2007.
I'm not convinced that having 3 people all equally empowered to sign agreements is a great idea either, though.
No, well, there has to be some other kind of a program that needs to be coordinated, so everybody has their scope of influence, or direction, whatever you want to call it, so that they're not overlapping.
Right. And so this is not only a field use policy, but also a facility use policy? Or do you have a different policy for, I'm thinking the difference between outdoors and indoors. Right?
Well, this
Are
talks
we-
about this talks about fields and courts, and the courts aren't all outside.
Right.
They're also inside the buildings. So maybe what we do is, when we go back, we'll take this back to the subcommittee, and we'll rework this and see, again, who's responsible for what, to make sure that everything is current. Because you
Well, is
questioned
that-
this, you
yep.
questioned the,
Yeah, I don't think this was ready to be before, I mean, it says here, need to find out current practices and titles. I think
Yep.
we're,
that's okay, so we can table that one.
Well, I'd rather not table it. I'd rather ask for a report on current practice. Rather than sending this back to the
No, I think that
policy
note is there.
subcommittee,
I
I
agree.
think we should send it to the administration first. Whatever we do here is going to have to be coordinated with what the administration is doing and would like to do. So let's just do that step now.
We have a policy subcommittee meeting on Thursday at 8:30. And I accept, what you just stated, but if you hadn't stated that, then on Thursday morning, we would have asked them to do that, and maybe have some other people in at a future meeting. Like the Director of Community Education, see what they're doing.
She does not have any involvement in the rental of our courts.
no.
Currently.
Currently.
Does she only just does her building?
Well, she does the outdoor basketball at the high school. Doesn't she in the summer?
She actually rents that from us.
Right, she's not out there renting it to
So
others.
she's not renting our
She doesn't rent to
facility,
others.
she is actually a rentor of our facilities.
Okay, so then her
So we certainly need to
Her
discuss
job
that.
description relative to this policy has then therefore changed.
Yes.
So-
Okay.
So what do you guys think a reasonable timeline would be to get a report back about kind of how we're doing things now, and if you have recommendations for structural changes?
Well, I think the working group meeting in November, our next meeting, probably is too quick. I think we could pull it off by the second meeting, so the second meeting in November. That'll be our first real time we get back together for a full agenda.
Do you feel at that meeting, sir, Dr. Lang, that you'll be able to take a look at this, digest it, have a conversation, and maybe make a recommendation of the way you see it moving forward? Would that be accurate,
Yeah,
sir?
a month's time would be fine. Yeah. That's fine.
I think any opportunity to cut this down, I think, would be beneficial. I mean, if you have basically one person to do it, it should be easier to word it than a page, I think.
Well, that was reflecting current practice in 2007.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying, I have a feeling, we should be able to cut this at least in half, I think.
I agree, sir.
It was complicated.
Just out of curiosity, when we collect fees for rental of a facility from a youth group, say, where does that money go? It doesn't go into, does it go into a revolving fund?
To our civic activities revolving.
Into the
account.
civic activities fund?
Yes.
Okay.
Which helps pay the bond.
No, only the
Question,
turf
if we
fields.
rent the field,
Oh, this is different.
Yep, field
These
has
are
a
different.
separate revolving fund.
okay.
Yes.
I thought you said field.
Well, I was talking more generally.
Anything
Because
on-
it wasn't clear to me where the split is between the turf field rentals, the regular field rentals, the
That's what I
gym
thought you were
rentals,
going
and all of that, so.
So if we rent the field, Michelle, and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe this is a question for the athletic director, who very shortly, I think, should come in front of us and kind of educate us a little bit more, certainly Dr. Lang. Right now, if we rent the field, it goes into a separate account as a result to pay the bond down. Would that be accurate?
If it is the turf field,
The
it's
turf
correct.
field. The turf fields.
Any other rentals go into a civic activity revolving fund.
For
They're
example, the
both-
courts,
Yes.
outside and indoor.
Any use, yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on.
Thank you. Okay. 1301.02, PTO use of facilities. This was also created in conjunction with the previous policy. It doesn't go into the same detail. This hasn't changed much over the years. It's only emphasized that a PTO will get one free event, and that free event is usually you waive the custodial fee, one event. So like, for instance, South Row would do that for the pumpkin fair. If somebody else has something else. Sometimes what happens, that's why the red is there in the middle of this policy. It says, provided that each PTO specifies the event notifies the business office upon receipt of invoice. Sometimes they get a bill and sometimes they don't because of history, current practice. They know which event they're not going to be charged, and you would know what it was. You're relatively new, you might not know that. And in some cases in the past, it bypassed the business manager somehow or another, the invoice, and it got sent to the PTO. That's why we put that in there.
Okay.
And everything else is just kind of like, just updating some things.
Is there a motion to accept?
Make a motion to accept the revisions for 1301.02.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Passed unanimously.
1302. The only thing we added into refreshment policy, it is strongly recommended to recycle appropriate materials and provide receptacles for collection. We just want people to pick up their trash after they use our fields and buildings. Does anybody have any questions?
There's a lot of wills in that.
Would you like it as shall?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I mean, all organizations or individuals using facilities shall pick up their litter, right? That's different than will make every attempt to pick up their litter.
I know, I thought that we talked about that too.
I mean, do we want them to pick up their litter or not?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so how about, instead of say, we'll make every effort to pick up, said shall pick up. How's that?
We could even require a deposit.
Right. I don't know if that needs to be put into the policy, but it could certainly be put into an operating
Yep.
manual. Same thing with organizations will make every effort to inform their users shall. I mean, at this point, they have to send out an email, most of them. I don't think that's an undue burden.
Make a motion to approve 1302 with the suggested change from will to shall.
Second.
Years.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Okay,
Abstentions?
1303, there was only one small change by putting Chelmsford in front of school committee at the first. We did not change any of the body of this. This is the naming of buildings and grounds. This was created in 2010.
Motion to accept 1303 as revised.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Unanimous, 4-0.
1701, advertising in schools and on school property. We did not change any of this.
Motion to accept the fact that it was reviewed and reaffirmed.
Second.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion?
No.
Hearing none. Yes?
Philip?
There was one, I did have a question about it, and now I
Yeah.
can't find it. I'm sorry.
Do you want to take a moment, or?
Maybe it's just that third paragraph, that no organization will use us unless authorized by the school committee and/or superintendent, and ask about how that, should it be superintendent or his, her designee? The principals are the ones making the decisions at most of the schools, right?
So do you want to put a slash in there and say designee? And then that way it is the principal? Or do you want to just say principal?
I don't mean to cut the superintendent out of the loop, but once again, I think it's important that we document practice rather than theory, and it's the principals who are making those decisions.
Are you in the third paragraph?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're authorizing it and or.
Well, it says or.
Right.
I mean, you could just say Chelmsford School Committee, comma, superintendent, comma, or principal.
Well, but I guess I read this to be like a full-blown kind of advertising type, either campaign or signage. Like a principal would,
Not a flyer.
no, like a principal would approve
Yeah.
a flyer going up in the building.
Right.
I wouldn't see that. But let's say they wanted to put a sign in the cafeteria for something special. And there would usually be some kind of an agreement entered into, that potentially could be a fee for that coming in. I would probably want to know about that, but not necessarily the flyer that they just hang, because we had this discussion, like say on a PTO or a school kind of welcome board. I don't see or approve those. But if it was a legitimate advertising type agreement, that would be something either I would want to see or I would want the school committee to see, because I wouldn't want an individual principal entering into that agreement and then not knowing what the content was, or have there be any kind of kind of pushback from the public that I didn't know about. So I guess it's just depending on how you
Interpret it.
read it.
Well, particularly if the wording were to be that we're co-sponsoring the event, then I think it would be really important to be at your level. If it's advertising the event through a high school event, that's different. Then we're not
Well, I wouldn't want to see that.
No,
Right.
and we're not co-sponsoring it. I mean,
Right.
it's just, I think that, like DECA in the Chelmsford Public Schools, then there's no question, it's got to go to you.
Well, the other piece is, it's key when it says, utilize any Chelmsford Public Schools facilities or the Chelmsford Public Schools name for advertising. So if they're going to use our name to advertise something or to sponsor something, it has to be approved. They just can't arbitrarily do it. And usually that approval doesn't come from a principal, it comes from the superintendent.
Oh, because in essence, you're speaking on behalf of the whole system, if you say Chelmsford Public Schools in any way.
Right,
So I don't think there's any question about that.
okay.
That was my point.
Feel better about it?
So we're not making any changes?
No.
That's fine. I mean, if that's,
Now,
if
let me
that's
ask.
your preference,
right.
I'm
The oth-
okay with that.
The other thing, in terms of accepting advertising, if you want, I will put in the reference of the policy that talks about having the flyers and the other pieces that the principals approve. And I can make a reference here, so it shows there's a link between this policy and that one, which comes a
Sure.
little later. All right.
Sure.
So I will look up that policy.
And you want to add the internet one as well, or not? Just to tie them all together?
Right, I just need whatever those numbers are, and I'll just add those. So we have an amendment to the motion that we will add the references to the policies that relate to this, for clarification purposes.
Okay,
Okay.
so we, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Okay, 1702, we didn't make any changes in this either, guidelines for advertising.
Make a motion to accept?
Second.
motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Unanimous.
And the last one is 1703. We didn't make any changes in this either, except we added the reference at the bottom, but we reaffirmed the body.
I make a motion, we accept.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? None.
Oh, Michelle. Best for last. This is all filled with numbers, isn't it?
Of course it is.
So exciting.
So that actually concludes the new business agenda for this evening.
liaison reports?
Well, we had a financial subcommittee meeting this morning.
Yes.
Do we want to briefly discuss some of, is that why we have?
If you would like to, sure.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is just turn it over to you. You had handed us some financials. You were going to do a quarterly report, and more than likely will be going to the Finance Committee. And they'll ask you some questions and whatever, just so that they know what the status is of what we have. So I'll just turn it over, and you can just highlight and talk about whatever you find appropriate from this morning, because we were there, what, an hour and a half?
Yeah.
2
I
hours.
just want to touch on a few points. I certainly do not want to go through this line by line. There are 3 reports in your packet. The first 2 reports are the general fund operating budget. The first is actually a report right out of Munis. The second report is an export out of Munis, the same information. The second report actually expands upon the first. The total of, if you go to the very total of the projection, you'll see our original budget is the 52.4 million as initially voted. The total expended to date is just over $6 million. The next column is the amount that is encumbered through the end of the year. These are salaries and open purchase orders, which are currently reserved in our system. And that leaves a balance of 6.9 million at this point. That is our current balance as of September 30th. The next figure, the next column of 7.1 million, that is our estimated required figure to finish out the school year. Obviously, it's very early on in the school year. We're only 1 month under our belt. We have 9 more months to go. But at this point, I'm estimating that we have another 7.1 million in expenses to be incurred. Part of that is the hourly wages. Part of that is other contracts that we have not fully encumbered. And that would bring us through June 30th. If all that occurred, our ending balance at this point would be a negative 198,000. While it is a deficit balance, it is very early in the year, not something to be alarmed at. However, it just proves that we are running a very, very tight budget at this point. Certainly, things change throughout the year. The projection will be looked at over the next coming months. And the December financials will also do another projection I'll bring to this committee, and that will ideally give you a much better position of where we are for the year and what we can project upon. Some of the lines within this report, you'll notice there are large deficits and large surpluses. I just want to let you know that that's due to some timing with some budget changes that Frank Antonelli had made. He had changed some of our chart of accounts to expand upon certain accounts to report them by location. Certain paras were broken out by location where they used to be lumped into one general ledger account. The payroll charges have not been allocated to those accounts properly, so that will be done over the next couple of weeks. They should be reflected in the October balances that you see, so most of that will be cleaned up in a matter of time. But overall, there's nothing alarming. I feel pretty good about the financials, but it is very early on. Things could change, and I just wanted to present that. I will be emailing this off to the Finance Committee as well as town officials, so they can forward it on to the selectmen as well if they wish, and we'll all be on the same page. Just want to mention that there is one additional report in your packet. It's the grant and revolving report. At this point, we have some 15 grants that are still open, and will actually be open for most of this year, if not the whole year. We have new 16 grants, and all our revolving funds. The biggest piece on this report is our estimated receipts for our revolving funds. The estimated receipts were actually set at the time of the budget, and I have reviewed all those figures, and they do seem to make sense this year. They seem to be in a line with what our actual revenues were last year, and in some cases, they're actually on the conservative level, which is really good.
Thank you.
So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will also be sending out, once the October financials are done, I will automatically send them out We probably won't do a presentation of them in the school committee, but the next presentation of school committee will be the quarterly for December.
And once again, Michelle, these are just strictly estimates, projections, and as we get closer to the end of the year, there'll be more data that you'll be able to review that are actuals.
Yes, correct.
Great, thank you.
And actually, one other thing, I should mention, the the 198,000 that we're projecting right now, that does not include the 500,000 that was actually voted at town meeting last night.
So that would show a surplus at this point, would that be correct?
It would.
Well,
Well, yeah, but does it
yeah, but a
It's-
decline in our carryover in the circuit breaker.
Right.
I mean, it's better than having a deficit or a shortfall, but
Correct.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
The Chet chair, again,
Yes.
what's going on?
I believe that account has a zero budget, if
Yeah.
I'm correct. That account was one of them that Frank Antonelli did not budget for, and he allocated in other places. So when the October financials come out, you will not see that line any longer.
It's a big number, though. What is it covering?
It's all the SPED program chairs.
All the SPED program
The
chairs?
3 SPED program chairs. In addition, I think there's a couple other people
Okay.
that were previously paid out of that line.
Okay. The other thing in the Munis report, it looks like a 71,000, 71,511 shortfall in the contractual services under custodial services, 4110.
Yes.
It's awfully early in the year.
Now, that is actually because that's our Aramark contract, I believe, 876,000 we reserved. And that is, part of that needs to be allocated to the community education program, the revolving fund.
Okay. But we've already expended 78,000?
78,000 a month, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess for a total of 8. Yeah.
Yes.
If I can, just for a second, and we're happy to answer questions. Just to set some context when you look at this report, and we talked about this morning. There was a lot of work that was done last spring to reconstruct or kind of blow out the chart of accounts. And I think the reason you're seeing some of the big surpluses and the shortfalls is because the budget that was loaded for 16 obviously reflected the new accounts and the money being moved to the proper fund sources. But all the employees who were hard-coded to old accounts didn't all come over properly into the new accounts. So that's the task that Michelle and the accountant are doing now, is actually going through and moving everyone into the proper account number if they were recoded. So that's why you're seeing some of the big dips and gaps in the report. We only had, at the end of September, a couple of payroll periods to really identify where the people were miscoded within the budget. So when you do receive the October report at the end of the month in another week or so, you're going to see a lot of those natural fluctuations are going to go away. And then the encumbrances will also be updated. So it's not hugely significant at this point. We're looking more really at the global for the year where we're falling into line. $198,000 kind of shortfall. This is, again, prior to the town meeting funding. It's certainly significant. I think it speaks to the fact that this is an incredibly tight budget. On the personnel side, which is the bulk of our budget, it's actually lining up pretty well.
Those numbers look good.
And you're pretty much on. And the way you know that is the accounts that are fully, or that are, the individuals that are properly coded to the accounts, and you look at what the encumbrances are, you're off by cents at the end of the year. So it's within $1, which is really good. So that makes me feel good about the other accounts are going to get into order. It's really some of the non-salary accounts that are kind of hurting us at this point. We talked a little bit about the sped tuition. Obviously, the vote last night for the town meeting will help kind of clear up the deficit and give us a little bit of a cushion as we get into this year. And, I'm sure there'll be more to come over the course of the year with that. Sped transportation is another issue, and even regular ed transportation, obviously higher than we anticipated. And those are, kind of solid costs at this point. We'll be able to project out because we're going to know how many vehicles are on the road on October. It's unlikely that those vehicles are going to drop by June. So those numbers are going to be pretty hard within the next month or two. We did indicate we would do another full-blown, a second quarter projection, and that's really going to give us many more payrolls between now and December to firm up our formal projections for the end of the year. At the end of October and the end of November, we'll give you the munis report similar to this. When we have finance subcommittee meetings, we can talk about it, but I think you're going to get a truer indication of where we are at December. It's very difficult for a school system to do a projection in July and August because we're not really paying anyone. So it takes into the start of the school year to really be able to work that out. And I think this, again, I'm not alarmed in any way. I just think it really speaks to an incredibly tight budget. And I think you're going to see the reporting as the months go on really kind of mirror more of what's happening. We talked about this morning, and I know we've talked about a couple of times, the other signal that this kind of sends up to me is not a concern necessarily for 16, it's more of a concern for 17. Because as we're looking at the 17 budget, we're already identifying, again, not personnel issues, but non-personnel costs in special ed tuition, in sped transportation, regular ed transportation. It's a structural deficit in 16 that's basically going to be carrying into 17. That's my bigger concern at this point, as opposed to, getting through 16. We'll get through 16. So that's, when we actually do, and I mentioned this morning, when we do our second quarter report and we talk about where we are for 16, we will also do kind of a forecast for 17, and what's it really going to mean as we're starting to put the 17 budget together, just so that people are kind of talking the same language and looking at the same numbers moving forward. So I would just offer that as, kind of an overview for tonight, and obviously as the months roll on, we'll continue to refine the projections.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Dr. Lane.
Is there anything else that we need to address under liaison report?
I just want to make one announcement. The Harrington PTO is going to have a trivia night on November 6th, and it will be at the Senior Center, and tickets are $12. There's additional information, and that will be on Facebook and also on their website. And because they've changed the location. It used to be at the Old Town Hall in North Chelmsford. And they've moved it so that they can expand because they had so many people there. But they also will have food.
Not just expand, yeah.
They're going to have food. There's all kinds of other things they're going to do a little bit differently.
They got their one-day beer and wine license.
They've had it before, because Justin had got it when she first started it. So, anyway, it's from 7 to 10, so if people are interested in that, take a look at it. So not only do we have a lot of activities in other organizations, we have them within our own. Plus, remember the musicals and things that are coming up at the high school.
Okay. Is there anything in terms of open agenda items from the past that would like to address tonight?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, and please correct me and educate me. One of the things I want to talk about is Aramark. Would that be under open items or new items, sir?
Either, I guess. So
Well, then if it's
what
under...
would you like to do? Go ahead.
Listen, I understand when Aramark was hired, it saved our school system or the town a lot of money. But I don't think anybody can deny the problems that we're having and the challenges that we have. It seems rampant. I've received several phone calls. I'm sure other members of the board and certainly the superintendent and you, Mr. Chairman, have received calls about how disappointed our parents are with all aspects with Aramark. Dr. Lane, Mr. Chairman, all I'd like to do is go on record to let you know that I'm totally against Aramark at this point. I'd like to move in a different direction. I know Dr. Lane is really drilling down and coming up with some creative and innovative ideas. I don't think we can have this situation anymore. And if we have to spend a little money for the schools, for the kids, and I think we should be able and prepared to talk about that at town meeting, because the way things are progressing right now, they can't. There's a problem every day, and in the end, the safety of the kids are a priority. So I'd just like to go on record and talk about that, sir. Thank you.
Do you want to say anything with regard to that?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm obviously concerned and troubled with the recent events as well, and I know this isn't the first time there's been an issue. I think, for me, I'm kind of separating it a little bit from, Aramark as a company, but more, any company that would be contracted to come in and provide that service, whether it's them or someone else. I think the one of the big issues that we have is around stability in staff and actually, providing people a livable and workable wage so that they want to come to work and stay at work. That's an issue for us. I think the turnover in staff has been huge, and that's something that I hear as we're out in the schools. I think it certainly was a cost-cutting measure, and I don't doubt that, there was a budget need at the time for that. What we're really looking at, over the course of this fall, and obviously we'll be bringing a recommendation forward to the committee, for action probably right after the first of the year, is what to do going forward. And I think, obviously, whether it's Aramark or if it's another management company under the same kind of contract or pretense, you get what you pay for.
That's right.
And I'm not trying to be fresh about it, but, we're obviously, they're not living up to my expectations for cleanliness in buildings, consistency of staffing, things of that sort. So, it certainly is on my radar. I hear your concerns. I get the daily calls and emails. Certainly, budget is important, but I think also quality of service and consistency in service has to come into the equation, and these are discussions we have to have over the coming months.
Thank you, Dr.
It is on my radar.
Thank you, sir.
And I'd like to give emphasis to Dr. Lang's comment about the first of the year, we'll be making some kind of decisions because we can't wait until the school year is one step up in order to make this move. So whatever's going to happen will have to happen in a timely fashion. Okay? Anything else?
Could you give us an update on the status of the facilities RFP?
Sure. I don't have the exact date off the top of my head, but we did issue the RFP. It was advertised. We had what was termed kind of a non-mandatory meeting for any interested individuals or firms to come forward and look at the RFP, discuss any questions they may have about it. I think we had about 6 firms that actually came to that meeting, which is very good. Had a kind of roundtable discussion for about 45 minutes to an hour, answered their questions. The RFP or the proposals are due, I believe, at the end of the first week in November.
November 5th.
November 5th. So we'll be receiving the proposals in at that point. As you know, very thankful and appreciative of town meeting last night approving the funding for that study. Notification is going out now, now that that's been approved, to really invite people to be part of both working committees, and even at the school level, we did talk about actually having individual school involvement in the review, so that is all forthcoming at this point. November 5th it will close. I believe that's a Thursday. We'll be doing kind of an internal review that Friday, over the weekend, early part of the next week, and then inviting firms in to give their presentations and proposals. So probably by the time we get together, there's an outside chance at the second meeting in November, we may have some indication for you as to a recommendation. If not, at the latest, it would be the first meeting in December, and then we would hopefully begin the work. But very excited. It's moving along. November 5th is the day, and I'll certainly fill you in on the total number of people that submit proposals, what they look like, and we'll be rolling right before the holidays.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. And do we make the, technically, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session for the purposes of collective bargaining.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, aye. Any opposition or abstentions? Hearing none. We're adjourned. Go into executive session.